from the people I could have potentially married.
The counterfeits.
The counterfeits. That was a prayer that I prayed for the 2 years that we were broken up. The exact words were, God, I pray that you shield Festus from the counterfeits.
And it worked.
And so when I told him that after the fact, he was like, that's why I had no dating life these last 2 years. He was like, no, it makes sense. I was like, yep. And it's funny because he started going, he transitioned over to VU Church when they first opened. And there were a lot of women there that were interested in him. By this point, I knew he was my husband. He just didn't know it yet. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of women there that were interested in him. And he literally could not see them. I mean, attractive women like that were blatantly like showing him their interest. He literally was blinded to them, like totally oblivious. Like he didn't see them at all.
No idea.
And it was just funny to be able to watch that and see that because I already knew. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't at all threatened by it. I was like, he doesn't know yet, but God's not going to allow him to see them. And he didn't. And it was really, really funny to watch. Like, he is like, so, I'm like, this girl is throwing herself at him and he is so oblivious. Like, and I had friends that would see it at the church too. Like, one of my friends that was in my prayer group, she'd be like, you should see this. She was like, these girls are so interested. I mean, they're actually sending friends, guy friends, up to Festus to ask him if he's single. And Festus still doesn't get it. Like, he doesn't even see it. And she was like, it's hilarious. I was like, thank you, Jesus. Like, it's not, there were counterfeits for him. You know, they can be a tremendous blessing to someone else, but they were not for him. And I knew that they weren't for him. It wasn't my place to intervene or say anything. God really took care of all of that. Like, he didn't have to offend anybody or anything. Like, he literally was blinded to them and did not see them. And that was my prayer.
Yeah. Thank you.
She got you covered.
Yes.
How has your relationship with God, like, looking back on all that has transpired, like, how has your relationship with God shifted or grown after seeing all that he's done in the midst of you guys, and now that you're married, what does that look like?
I think the biggest thing is that because of everything that happened and us being so sure and so certain that God brought us together and that he ordained this marriage, any challenges, marriage is challenging, and so any challenges you face, there's no doubt, you know, if you didn't have that 100% confirmation from God that your spouse was your spouse, ordained by him, anytime you reach a difficult situation in your marriage or life happens, you could easily question and doubt, did I marry the right person? Like, I don't feel like that would ever cross my mind. I don't care how bad it gets. I will never, ever question, did I marry the right person? Never. Because I am so sure that this came from God. And because we allowed him to lead us, I think that's the biggest thing. So even like we didn't live together before we got married. So, you know, people also look at that crazy. They're like, you guys you're paying two different bills. You're not benefiting from you're engaged, you're getting married anyway. So why not just move in together? And, we chose to really honor God. Even, you know, I'm like, how can we get this far and him bless us in this way, and then we get engaged and I'm like, okay, now let's go shack up and live together. Like, that would be such a slap in the face. Like, I felt like, and so of course it crossed our mind and things like that, but we so when we got married and you're now living together for the first time, like all these new things, all these new transitions, like I can see how that could be really challenging. But when you have God at the center and you know that this is the person that God chose for you, there's no doubt, there's no questions. So when life gets hard, when marriage gets hard, you stay grounded in that, and you're always able to go back to that and remember the story that God wrote for you. And so you can just reflect on that, and it brings you, like when he makes me mad, I can reflect on that, those beautiful moments in our story, and I'm like, this, so we don't always represent ourselves the way that God sees us. But so even when he's not showing me that person that I know he is in God, or I'm not showing him that person, when I have we call them my Jenny moments. Jenny's my alter ego. It's like I'm still able to see it in him, even in those ugly moments, because of the story that God wrote for us, and being able to, there's so many significant moments, and so being able to reflect on that is everything. And those are moments we're never going to forget, ever. So even 40 years from now, when we're old and short-term memory loss, like we are going to remember that. And so I think that has really helped us with this transition in marriage. I feel like we have transitioned very well, even better than people I see that were living together for years. Lived together for 10 years before they got married. And so you would think that they know each other inside and out. But the best advice that we got from the pastor that married us was, he said, when couples ask me about the transition to moving in together and all of that, he's like, I tell them, people that live together for 10 years and then get married, it's the same as you move. He was like, it's not any less of a transition than you two moving in together after the marriage. He was like, because no one is who they are. Who you see when you're dating someone is not who they are when you get married. So you could have been living with somebody for 10 years, but when you get married, marriage changes people. For, some for the good, some not, but it changes people. And so you could have been living with this person for 10 years, and then you get married and you're like, who are you? So we weren't living together. We didn't have that everyday, day-to-day together to get comfortable with something that wasn't really what it is. So I never got comfortable every day with this situation, and then had to get married and find out that's not really okay, now they're comfortable because now we're married. So now I'm going to see who they really are. We moved in together, seeing who we really were from the beginning, once we were already married. And so I feel like that transition has been more smooth for us than friends and other people that we have seen that did it differently. So
yeah, I think confirmation is really powerful. And like, just like you said, having that confirmation from God, it eases your mind. It just, you have so much peace. And I'm so glad that I waited as long as I did, because there were a lot of times where I wanted to jump the gun and just do it and tell her I loved her. But having that confirmation means everything. And knowing that regardless of what happens later, God told you this, and you remember God told you this, and God told you in this way. You can't, like, there's nothing better than that. You can't ever question what you have just because you have that confirmation. So I think that's the biggest thing, is to wait for that confirmation.
And then there's always naysayers, people that are going to come around and be like, oh, are you sure about her? She has a child, and are you sure you're ready for that? Like, all of those things that can sow seeds of doubt if you don't have that confirmation from God. So if anything like that had come up with Festus, he knew for sure yeah, all of that is true, and I've never been a dad, but I trust that God knows that I'm capable of doing this if He has confirmed to me that this is my wife. So, see you later. That's what it is, you
Yeah.
know. Like so. But had he not had that confirmation from God, and someone poses those questions to him, it could make him think like, oh, maybe you're right. Am I ready to be a stepdad? Am I ready for this? Is this really what I want? Like, and begin to go down that road of doubting and questioning all these things because you never truly had that confirmation.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, because I think even without anybody saying that to me, I think that's questions I asked myself before I had confirmation. That's questions I asked myself, like, are you ready to be a dad? Like, are you, I mean, do you think you'd be a good dad? And is that, are you ready for that? So prior to the confirmation, that's stuff that I was thinking. And it's something that God had to bring me to. And God was, very specifically, He said, would you rather have her know me and not, would you rather have her have a child and know me, or have her without a child and not know me? And that made it so very easy. But He said it that way. He said, because from as long as for as long as you've been a child, your prayer was that you would have a God-fearing woman. This is what makes her a God-fearing woman. So is it something that you can deal with, or would you like to have someone that doesn't fear me without that? So once I got that, shortly after that, I had my confirmation, and regardless of what anybody said to me about that, you would have thought I was a father already.
Yeah.
It was very easy for me to just be like, no, you know what, God told me this.
And I never let him test it out because I never introduced my daughter to him. I never introduced her to him. So the only thing she knew of him was we used his Netflix account. I was still using it during the 2 years that we were broken up. So she saw this name on the screen whose account we would always go in, and she didn't know who Festus was, and she was like, oh, I'm going on to Festus' Netflix account to watch my shows. And so then once she finally did meet him and she found out his significance to me and all of those things, she was like, all this time, that's who Festus is? Like, she was shocked. For the last 2 years, I've been watching this guy's Netflix account. And I never met him, and that's who he was. And that's who you're going to be with. And, like, she was shocked. But, so that was an area, I never let him even try it out. Like, try out this whole dad thing. It was like, no, I'm not introducing you to my daughter.
And it's probably a good thing she didn't, because that may have scared me. That maybe I would have been like, I don't think I'm ready to be a dad. I don't think, because that would have been prior to me getting confirmation, and once you get confirmation, regardless of what comes into the situation, like that, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anymore, because you have your confirmation, you have your peace of mind.
And so I know there's a lot of women out there who are in my same situation, where you're a single mom and you're trying to date and you're trying to honor God. So in those moments where your flesh is getting the best of you and it's getting tough, like you love God and you want to honor Him, but your flesh kind of gets in the way and you lose sight of it, one thing you never lose sight of is your child. And so especially when you have a daughter, they watch your every move. They see everything that you do. So even if you get in those moments where you're falling short of God, look at that child, like who's watching you and looking up to you and is one day going to mimic your steps. I mean, they do everything we do. And so I wanted more than anything for her to see and have an image of what this is supposed to look like. Like, God loves us so much. And so this beautiful story that I have, you can have that too. You don't have to settle. You don't have to live with a man. You don't have to give your body to a man. You don't have to do any of those things to be loved. You have the greatest love of all in God. And because He loves you so much, He's going to bring you the perfect person, and you don't have to settle for anything less. And so she has for years watched me go through life and go through the struggles and push really hard to get through school and get a good education and to be able to provide for her. And all these years, the majority of them as a single mom, and, you know, bringing her to church and trying to, you know, expose her to God as much as I could. And then, like, knowing that mommy doesn't bring different men around all the time, like, that was never a part of her life. Just, I know that she's going to carry that with her forever. And that when she does get to that age where she has to make these decisions, she's going to have the perfect model, you know? And all of this happened at an age for her that she's old enough to understand. So she was 10 when we got married. She's 11 now. And so she's old enough to understand, you know, and have seen that we really honored God every step of the way. We prayed, and we didn't live together. We didn't do any of those things, and she sees all that. So even beyond my relationship with God, that just means so much to me that I was able to provide that example for her more than anything else, more than going to college and getting a degree and all these other examples you try to set for your child. Like, to me, the one that's probably the most impactful is showing her how much I love God and have chosen to honor him in my relationship.
Yeah. Um, so as we conclude, what advice would you give singles who are in that waiting or searching period of their life, who are just like, God, where's my mate? Like, what's going on? And if there is someone in their life that they're like, okay, how do I know if this is the person? Like, what advice would you give?
My advice, it actually comes from a song. I can't remember the name of it now, but it says, "While I'm waiting, I'm not waiting." Um, and I think that's so big that you don't take the word waiting literally, because when you do, you're just kind of sitting back and waiting for God to do the work, when there's a lot of work you can do yourself. There's so much you can do yourself. There's so much prayer you can do. There's so much fasting you can do. There's so much that you can do to work on yourself, to, you know, make yourself a better person for whoever that person God's going to bring for you. Because if you're a mess, and, you know, it's very simply could be that that person's ready, but you're not. You know, so if you're waiting and you're not ready, you'll be waiting for a very long time. I think that's the biggest advice I can give, is that while I'm waiting, I'm not waiting. There's so much I'm doing. I'm fasting. I'm praying. I'm seeking God in every. You know, I'm doing everything I can. I'm serving, being in the church. You know, listening from God, getting into the Word. And when you're doing that, I think God starts to speak to you a lot better. And then he points out to you certain things that whether you need to work on yourself so that this person can find you quicker. Because if you're just going to wait, you'll be waiting a very long time.
God's always speaking. It's just a matter of, do we hear him?
Listen.
And so when you're dating and you're doing this, and, you know, it's so easy to be distracted and not be able to hear him. So you really sometimes need to just sit back, pray, fast, and silence the world around you. Just silence everyone, everything, and spend some time, a lot of time alone with God. And so, yes, we broke up. And when we tell people this story and they're like, oh my God, I can't imagine being broken
2 years.
2 years, that's such a long time. It really doesn't feel that long. And honestly, I feel like we broke up in the physical, but we were always together in the spiritual realm. So, and I feel like that the way we were able to get back together, and we literally picked up where we left off. There was no starting over. Mm-hmm. So it's like we were always together in the spiritual, and then when God brought us back together in the physical, we just carried on from where we were. And so that time, I wouldn't change it for anything. Of course, I wish it would have only been like 6 months of being broken up, but I wouldn't change it. It was
And
so needed.
if we were, broken up for only 6 months, I would have took the 2.5 years to propose. So
Yeah, I mean, he probably would have took longer.
exactly.
So it would have ended up,
Still being
our
2 years.
way. Our way would have been longer than God's way. I'm sure of it. I'm
Yeah.
sure of it. So, my advice for singles is, yeah, just that silence, the distractions, because that really keeps you from hearing from God. And so, if there's any of my lady friends out there who are serial daters, or you have like a lot of guy friends, a lot of male influence and things like that in your life, I challenge you to fast men for 40 days and see how much you hear from God during that time. I'm telling you, it is going to change your life. And I actually have a friend who recently did that, and she asked me to go to lunch with her the other day, and we did. And I totally forgot that she had texted me about a year ago saying, "Remember that fast you did for 40 days? Can you explain it to me?" And I did explain it to her. She proceeded with that fast. She met her husband shortly after, and she's now engaged to be married. And so I totally forgot I had even mentioned the fast to her. And she just this week said to me, she was like, "I did that fast. And when I tell you that everything opened up after that, and someone I would have never, ever even paid attention to came into my life and tells me that he's been watching me for a whole year." She goes to this church. I won't put her on blast, but I was just like, wow. So I really feel like God brought her to share that testimony with me this week, timely for me prior to having this interview with you. Try it out. Prayer and fasting, maybe not 40 days, maybe 30, whatever you feel led to do by God. But don't just simply fast from food. Fast from men. It's a huge distraction. Or on the flip side, men fast from women.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's someone that, it's just a friend. It's just a friend that needs help with somebody. It's just this, it's just that. No, just if they're friends, they'll understand. Like, I'm spending some alone time with God. I don't want any distractions. And